Hello, welcome to the simulation lecture. This time around I'm going to show you basically how to use Excel and simulate things. And one or two other things that I'll show you as well. So let's get started. Alright, so the first thing I want to do is tell you about why we're dealing with this. Well, when you're designing things like level progression, loot drops, in-game economies, and many other things as well, you need to be able to figure out how quickly it should go, how much money people need to get, how much stuff is going to cost us. And we want to be able to simulate all this stuff beforehand before we implement it into a real game, because we're going to have to actually make a lot of changes and fixes to things to make sure everything looks right and feels right and doesn't feel like you're grinding forever, or it doesn't feel like, hey, everything's just given to me, it's just raining money left and right. So let's continue on to see what we need to do. Alright, so first of all, what is Excel? Well, it's basically a large calculator that's kind of this magic scratch pad all combined in one. It's useful for other things besides game design, but you can figure out things like budgets and schedules and time logging, but that's all the boring stuff. We can use it also, besides just calculating things, we can also use it for basically data input. We can create our item lists, we can create creatures, we can do all kinds of things, and we can import this data into the game. So we can put out from Excel very useful data formats. And it's actually pretty easy that way. Alright, so let's go ahead and start looking at Excel first. Let's look at the parts. So we're using this here because I'm going to show you in here first so we don't have to switch back and forth. So parts of Excel. Well, the main part is the worksheet. Basically, it's a piece of paper, and this paper contains cells. Alright, on that paper, the cells are basically the containers that hold our data and formulas. So this is what we're looking at inside of each of these squares. All right, so those cells are arranged in rows and columns, and that's going to be helpful later on when we want to address them. So with that, so we have this page that we have all these cells in. But we also have multiple pages, the ability to do multiple pages. So this is the Windows version, what it looks like. So we have Sheet 1, Sheet 2, and Sheet 3. We can actually rename them at the bottom if we wish and create more sheets. And of course we could reference between these sheets. Alright, so with that, as we enter data into these cells, there is actually a spot at the top called the formula bar. Alright, so this formula bar is where we can actually type in the formula bar, so it's a bigger area to type in, or we could type it in the cell, but the formula bar is a larger area, we can see more in it, and sometimes it'll, if we have a formula in the cell, if we click on the cell, it shows the value in the cell, but at the top in the formula bar, we can actually see the formula. Alright, well, let me go ahead and show you around. Alright, so let's go ahead and start off with a brand new page here. Alright, so let me go ahead and get that on the one you want to see. Okay, this is Excel. Alright, this is the main worksheet area. Each one of these are the cells. This is a row. This is a row. This is a column. Very easy. So we have one sheet in this one right now. We can add more. All right, and if we double click down here, we can rename it the first in this case. All right, and up here we have the formula bar. All right, I want to show you something here. Let's say you're you're entering a bunch of stuff, like say a series of numbers, so 1, 2, 3, and you need to do 100 of those, or 30 of those will be fine for now. That's a lot of typing you're gonna have to do, and we have this kind of this cheat that we can do if we select them. So basically, if I left click and hold and drag, that's gonna select several at once. But if I do this and drag, and then I go over here when I have these highlighted and I go to this little square in the corner, you'll notice how my cursor changes to a plus. All right, so I'm going to drag this down to 30. Dunk. And if I let go, it's going to fill that in for me. Now, I can, if that's not what I want to do, I can actually change autofill. I can actually have it, just copy the cells, which is kind of silly, but it works. You might need that sometime. Fill series, things like that. So very useful in this case. All right, so let's continue on here. Let's say we have that, and let's go ahead and fill in something else. Let's start off 100, 200, 300. All right, so you get the idea on that. So we're going to do that. I'm going to drag this down and, oops, drag that down. And look, it's smart enough to figure out what we're doing. All right, something else that's actually pretty smart is if we're referencing cells, and we're going to talk all about this as we move on, or when we move on. If you do that and we try this, if we just drag it down, it's pretty smart and it knows exactly what it needs to do in that case. So it'll reference the correct one in order. All right, so of course saving is pretty easy. You can go up to here to file and save as, or save. Of course, it has the save icon here. That all works just fine. All right, so let's move on here, and I'm going to show you a few other things. All right, so we kind of talked about it earlier. Naming a cell. All right, so that's pretty easy. If we want to name a cell, it's usually one or more letters followed by one or more numbers. So the columns are labeled with letters, and the rows are labeled with numbers. So let's go ahead and look back at that again. All right. Well, kind of already showed you this when we were adding these numbers together. But let's look a little bit closer here. So if I click on that, we can actually see the formula here. So this cell is equal to A1 plus B1. So A1 is referencing this first cell, A1. All right, and B1 is referencing the second cell, B1. All right, and of course we're just adding them together as we go through there. If we click down here on the fourth line, all right, so it says A4 plus B4. That's Excel trying to be smart for us, and it's actually working out in this case. But let's try something new. Let's go over here to a cell and drop in the universal coefficient of all answers, 42, right? So let me go ahead and drop in 42, and that's just a number. It doesn't have anything, nothing special. But if I go over here, and let's go ahead and modify this one. Let's go ahead and multiply that whole thing, or that by this, 42. So I've done that, and you can either hit the check mark or the X. The check mark will OK it, and the X will erase what you did, or you can hit Enter. So it's actually multiplying it now, and it's actually working out pretty well. Now let's try to bring this down to the rest of them. Uh-oh, something went wrong. In fact, Excel is telling you that. It's saying, hey, I don't think you're doing what you think you're doing, or you think you wanted to do. So here it says the formula in this cell refers to cells that are currently empty. So it's going, yeah, I think you messed up on this one. So let's fix this. So currently, well, if we look at it right now, it says A1 plus B1 plus I6. If we look here, it's I7. There is nothing in I7. So let's fix that. All right, so we have the ability to lock down values. So we can actually lock this one down. We want that one to always be on L6, or excuse me, I6. So let's go ahead and hit $I, $6. All right, so that's going to lock that one down specifically to that one. All right. If I go ahead and hit Enter, it will continue to look like it's worked. In fact, it does. So what I'm going to do is drag this down. Hey, that looks like that works better now, doesn't it? Now, we can actually just do part of it. So if we're doing a big, like, kind of grid of calculations, we can lock it down to just the columns, or we can lock it down to the rows depending on which $sign we put in. If we put in both, it locks it to that specific one. If we put the $sign in front of just the letter, then it locks it to that column. If we do it to the number, it's the row. So let's move on. All right, that's pretty handy. But let's talk about charts. I know charts are boring, but sometimes they can express information in a fairly useful way or easy to read way. So if we kind of like look at it here, this says apparently we rocked in the first quarter and started slack the rest of them. Let's go ahead and see how we can create these. All right, let's go ahead and jump out, and let's use this. Let's use some of these numbers. I am going to go up here where it says charts. Now, it varies between the two different versions, but it's not that different. So let's say we want to, I don't know, chart this data right here. So let's go ahead and select that, and let's do columns. All right. Now, of course, we could choose any one of these that we want. Sure, why not this one? So we see this here. It's kind of hard to see on the values there, but it does work. So let me go ahead and drag this around over here, and we want this. So it's easier to see. Now, at the very bottom, those are still pieces right there. We can modify this if we wish. Oh, came up on the wrong screen. So we can do colors, we can set gradients, we can change the lines, do the shadows, we can change how it looks. There's all kinds of things we can do here. So we can change how it plots it, so we're breaking it up into different parts. It has all kinds of stuff here. So you'll notice here that I went ahead and deleted part of that, so you can actually go in and change each little section if you wish. I'm going to delete this one because we have a few others that we can look at. Let's go ahead and select this data here. All right, and do an area chart. How about a 3D area chart? Okay, that's not so cool. That's kind of hard to see. So I'm going to pull something here that's pretty cool, you might think. And we'll look at that in a little bit, how I did it in just a very short amount of time. So, alright, so we've come up with a random number here. And we're going to drag this across, or at least down a little bit here. And we'll do it across one here. Hey, look, a 12 out of all those. Okay, so now that we've done that, let's create an area graph out of this. 3D area graph. Hey, look at that. All right, so let's kind of modify this so it's easier to see. It's great for representing information. Now, you don't have to limit it to 2. You can do more. You can change how it looks. You can change its position, things like that. It's pretty cool. So let's go ahead and look at 3D rotation. So we can do different different values like that. We'll look at each way. There you go. Okay, so different types. You can do bar charts, all that stuff. It's up to you. It's not terribly difficult. You can literally just go in and choose which one you want up here. Again, Windows is the same, basically. Pie charts for adding up to 100%, like we did in the having the PowerPoint. So it works out pretty cool. All right, so let's move on here. All right, so let's talk about creating formulas. All right, so you kind of saw this already. Basically, the way you create a formula is you start off with an equal. All right, so the equal sign basically is the way that Excel knows that you are going to be entering a formula as opposed to some text or numbers. All right, so you can either enter it directly into the cell, so you can click on the cell and start typing, or you can type it up in the formula bar itself. Very handy. So let's talk about some basic math. Basic math includes your typical operators. So operators are, like the plus sign, the minus sign, the multiplication sign. So it's an asterisk is a multiply. Most of the time, programming uses this, so that's the way they go with it. And the divide. So we have all of those. So let's go ahead and go back here to Excel. All right, so we kind of showed you the add and subtract, the add and the multiply. So let's go to here and 4 here, and we're going to put in an equal sign to say we're going to be putting in a formula. So I'm going to click here. So 2, in this case, N5 is that cell, plus 05 is 6, right? And if we change these, they'll update. Very handy. Now, we can also hand enter numbers. So 2 plus 7, that works. Of course, so we have 2 minus 7. We have 2 times 7. And 2 divided by 7. So we have all those abilities and more. I can show you a few others along the way. So let's move on here. Now that we've shown you those operators and how to start a formula, we're going to talk about a few other things along the way as well. All right, so the next thing we need to do is talk about dealing with a group of cells. So far, it's only been one, but it can get long. So the way I was showing you is you would do, whatever plus whatever plus whatever. This works. It's fine. It's just ugly. But so let's talk about the short way of doing things. So instead of that, we can actually just do, the first colon and then the second, or the last. And this doesn't have to just stay in the same column. So if we look back, let's say we want to add all these together. All right, so we have a cheat called sum. So basically what that does, this is a function, and what it does is adds numbers together. So we could go E1 colon F22. Close that out, and there we go. All right, so something I want to tell you real quick. If you want to recalculate stuff, hold down Command and hit equal, and it will recalculate it. So those are changing because they're random numbers. So it's supposed to randomly choose something else. It's kind of like rolling dice, or a 1,000-sided dice, or a 10,000-sided die. And it keeps adding them together. So that's a lot better than, E1 plus E2 plus E3 plus blah, 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 all the way through to like F20, F21, F22. That we could do that. That would work. That would be completely valid, but a mess. All right. So let's find your center. We have a function called average. Guess what it does? It finds the average of the selected numbers. Mathematically, it's called the mean. In fact, we also have another one where we can find the center. It's the middle number, the median. So let's go ahead and swap back here. Let's find the average of these numbers. So I spelled that out there, and that's just a text string. It's perfectly valid right there. So I'm going to do equals, and we're going to do average. Now you'll notice that it's saying, hey, we have some functions that look like what you're doing. We can actually either go down there and click on it, or we could arrow down to it, and it'll kind of finish it off for us. And you'll also notice, if you look here, this yellow box here, it's kind of telling me about this. It's reminding me about the function. It's reminding me specifically about the parameters, and that's what these are. These are also known as arguments, basically ways that we pass information into these functions. So let's go ahead and do this real quick. Average. Let's go E1 colon F22. Now, you don't have to capitalize these letters. It just looks better if you do. All right, so the average on this case is 4,740.43 and then some other numbers. That's average, and of course it'll change when we run through random. All right, so the other one we were dealing with So you notice I messed up there. It's like pound name question mark. It's like it doesn't know what I'm trying to do here. So let's go ahead and fix that. Median. Let's go ahead and choose that one. All right, so we are going to find that. We can do it like that as well. Hit enter. So it found the center number, basically. All right. Let's go ahead and drop back over here. All right, so adding and counting, we've already seen some. So basically that's where we add a bunch of numbers. We have count as well. Count is very, very handy. Basically it counts the number of elements. Now, let me go ahead and drop back over here real quick. Do you want to know how many are here? Let's see, let's do the count. And that equals count. So there are 44 there. There are always 44 there. Pretty cool, huh? All right, there's one other one. We have one that's called count if. And that's pretty, this one counts if something is true. Count if, and we're going to tell it the range. So these guys here, comma, and what will make it count. So if it's greater than 5,000, try that. Sorry, forgot you have to put it in quotes. So if it's greater than 5,000, it will count it. So if we go through here, hey, look, about half of them are greater than 5,000. Pretty handy. All right, let's check to see if something is true. So we have this if statement that allows us to branch and do things according to some test, basically. So it allows us to do branching logic. Basically, the first part is, if this first portion is true, then do this. Otherwise, do this. The last part is actually optional. So let's look at that. This is actually pretty important when we're looking at stuff. We actually saw it kind of in action in the COUNTIF. So let's try something here. So we're going to do an equal here. If, all right, this is greater than 5,000, then do this. Actually, let's see. Let's do 9,000. All right, so we're going to try that first. So if it's greater than 9,000, it'll say wow, right? It is in this case. Let's go and drag that down. Wow and false. Okay, so it's going to drop in a false if there's nothing there. If it's not. Now we can fix this. We can have it say something else. I'm going to actually modify up there in the formula bar. Oops. So that's true. Let's go ahead and drag this down. And wow. All right, so we have that. Of course, that will change on the fly. Pretty cool, huh? That's the if statement. Very useful. Very, very, very useful. You'll be using that a lot. All right, so the next one we're going to look at is basically the way we can, find the highest number of a set of given values and the lowest number of a set of given values. Max and min and max. So let's go ahead and look at that real quick. All right, so let's go up here and do an equal sign on this. All right, let's find the smallest number of all of those. All right. Max. And let's find the maximum number. Here's the maximum number. Hey, look, we had 1,000 or 10,000. So that will min will find the smallest number of them all, and maximum will find the highest number of them all. All right, let's go ahead and go back and continue on. All right, so let's talk about conditionally adding and counting. I've actually already showed you the conditional counting earlier on, but we'll kind of run over that real quick again. So we have the sum if, and that allows us to count something if some criteria is met. All right, of course, allows us to add the values, and of course we have the count if, same thing, so we'll count if the criteria is met. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. We're going to go ahead and look at the count if real quick. Sum if first. All right, so let's go ahead and go here real quick. And let's say sum if. All right, so equals, and we're going to do sum if. All right, so if this range, and if that is, less than 5,000. All right. So this is the easy one. And basically it's going to add them up if it's less than 5,000. If the value in that cell is less than 5,000. Okay, so one that's completely different. This is a function that has multiple parameters, optional parameters. All right, so we're going to do sum if. And we're going to do our range again. So we're going to select all those. Actually, we're going to use just the first one here. Not that. Let's try this. So we're going to check these for this. If it's greater than 1,000. Or, yeah, 1,000. So if one of these is greater than 1,000, then it's going to sum this. All right. So if the value's here, if this value is greater than 1,000, what it is, it will add this. If this is greater than 1,000, which it isn't, it won't add this. So let's go ahead and close this out and give it a try. So look at that. Pretty handy. Of course, we are using count if over here, so we're counting if it's greater than 5,000. All right, let's move on. So our next thing is randomness. Okay, so I've kind of showed you one of them here. We actually have two. So we have the base portion of it, the rand, or random. So it produces a random number between 0 and 1. So we can actually use this to modify stuff. People could use this for a random chance at something. You can do that, but I prefer this one here, rand between. Okay, so rand between is one that allows us to find random numbers between a minimum and maximum inclusive. So if I do minimum of 5, maximum of 10, the possible numbers are 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And it will return that. So there's something I need to tell you about randomness in computers. It's not all it's cracked up to be. Randomness in computers kind of has this little, I wouldn't say flaw, but kind of weakness. The way it's set up is that there's this number that it starts off with, and it gets that number from the clock. So how many seconds has it been since a specific time in 1972? That's just when they chose it. It works fine. But they use that information to generate a random number. So they use this math formula that they'll go through, and it'll take those seconds and then convert that into some completely different number. Now, on machines that don't have a clock, a real-time clock, a lot of times they will use a random number. Use the time in seconds or milliseconds since the machine has started or been powered up. So it's completely valid, but it can be a little bit predictable, which is really funny. Now, really, there is special hardware that would give you random numbers. You can do it with a webcam by covering over the webcam and looking at the values that show up in the display. Because if you cover it over, in fact, if I do that here, you will probably notice that there are kind of these speckles that are happening. All right, and with those speckles, we can figure out, we can do another random seed, or just use that as the value. Or we could use things like an atomic clock, or we could watch for radiation coming off of an atomic source. Very random. It works out very well. But this random we're using right now, it's pretty useful, and it does just fine for games. So let's go ahead and look at those randoms, the random functions here again. All right, so we can use it for a coin flip. Flip, if I can spell. All right, so we do an equals rand between. All right, and a 0 for the lower number, and a 1 for the upper number. All right, 1 or 0. So if we go through those, it will flip between the two. All right, how about a 1d6? All right, so 1,6, because it starts off with 1 and ends in a 6. So there's a 3, and that keeps flipping. Now, here's something I need to tell you. All right, so a 2d6 isn't just 2 through 12. No. Those are the possible values are 2 through 12. But the way to properly simulate this is to do two random calls. So we do rand between, oops, type that again, rand between 1, 6 plus another rand between. Now you notice we're not typing another equals here. One comma 6. All right. So the reason why we're doing this is because when you roll two dice, there are many different ways to make up certain values. The last two, the 2 and the 12, there's only one way to make each of those. So that's 2 1s and 2 6s. Those are the lowest values that you can do, the lowest combinations that you can create those with. Now, if we go for 6, all right, so actually, yeah, 7 and 5 are the easiest ones to make, are the ones that, will build that out. So as we go, the number kind of looks like this. It's kind of this, what's called a bell curve. So if we are looking at, here, let's actually run through this. Okay, so 1, 2, 3. Actually, let's go this way real quick. Let's go down because it's going to be a lot easier that way. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. All right, so we have 12 here. All right, so there is one way to make, actually there are 0 ways to make 12, so that doesn't count. So there's one way to make a 2, that's 2 1s, and there is one way to make a 12, that's 2 6s, right? Well, how many ways are there to make 3? All right, so we could do a 1 and a 2. Well, that's actually just 1 and a 2, that's one way, and a 2 and a 1. That's another way, so we have 2. All right, 11. Again, a 6 and a 5 and a 5 and a 6, that's 2, right? All right, and you see what's going on here. So how many ways are to do a 4? So we have a 1 and a 4, so that's 2, because we can do 4 and the 1, so that's 2 plus a 2 and a 2, so that's 3. All right, so 10. So we have a, this is also a 3 as well, so it's, let's see, a 6 and a 4 is one way, a 4 and a 6, a 5 and a 5 will make that as well, so that's 3. All right, and if we keep going here, a 5, we could do a 1 and a 4 and a 1, so that's 2. A 2 and a 3, and a 3 and a 2. All right, and that actually, let's see, I think that's it right there. So that would be 4 total. All right. Okay, so a 5 and a 4 and a 4 and a 5, that's 2. Let's see, a 6 and a 3, and a 3 and a 6. You see what we're going here. If I keep going, it's going to take forever. But yeah, it just keeps going on here. We have a 6, a 5 and a 6 and a, sorry, a 5 and a 1 will do a 6, right? A 3 and a 3 will do a 6. A 4 and a 2 will do a 6. So it just keeps going higher and higher. And 7 actually happens to be the one that you can do the most combinations to do. All right, so that's a bell curve. So that's the reason why we're doing 2 randoms between these two. If I were to continue this on, if I wanted to do 3, that would work. Doing this that is bad. That's not right. Yes, it will give you a number between those two, but that is not a proper simulation of a roll. I'm just going to tell you that now. So don't do that. All right, so of course, if you want to do multiple dice, so if it's a 1d6 plus a 1d20, that would look like this. See a 1d6, so 1,6. All right, and we keep moving over here. Oops, what do we do? Oh, it's complaining that's not the same. All right, so if we keep going on here, I'm clicking up in the function bar. All right, so we're going to add a d20 now. Rand between. All right, 1,20. And that's how we do that. Pretty cool, huh? All right, let's go ahead and move on here. All right, so let's talk about logical operations. So logical operations are basically a type of math equation. It's really more in the logical, so if something is true and false, we have the ability to kind of work with them. So if something is ANDed, if we give two truths, so if this is true and this is true, then that gives us back a true. That also works with more things. So if this is true and this is true and this is true, we get a true back. Now, if it's this is true and this is false and this is true, that will give back a false. Now, anything inside of that and that happens to be false will automatically return it to false. So it's all or nothing. All right, we also have an OR. So if this is true or this is true, then it returns true. It's one gets them all. So this is true or this is true or this is true, it will return true. The rest can be false, it doesn't matter. So we can kind of see that in action here. All right, so we have three things here. True, false, true. All right, so we're going to AND these together, equals AND. I'm going to drag these here. That's false, okay? See how it returned to false on here? These are just hard-coded values here. If we do an OR, and we test all of these, it will be true because at least one was true. Now if we do this one here, the AND will be true and the OR will be true. All right, the only to make both of them false is to make all of them false. All right, so that's basically coming up because I pasted somewhere. So all right, so it's AND and OR. Pretty cool. We could use that. So let's move on. Now, we have something that allows us to do kind of this lookup of information. I'm going to go ahead and show it to you here. So let's go ahead and basically allows us, it's short for vertical lookup. So it allows us to find data within a table given a value. So we also have another one called index. So that will give us, it's the same thing as VLOOKUP basically, but it has two values instead. So it can go into a column and a row. So we can give it two numbers and find where we need. We also have one called match. So it allows us to find a searcher group of data and find the position where that data is. So let's go ahead and look at that. Okay, so let's see if we can go over here. All right. So we're going to start here, and we're going to do a a VLOOKUP. All right, so this is the VLOOKUP. Now I'm going to show you something here real quick. So this has got a lot of parameters, and this is a fantastic thing to look at. So you notice here how this is underlined. If we click on it, give it a second here, Excel will bring up kind of this help for us. So we can actually go through here and see what this function is, and it gives us examples and all kinds of stuff. It makes our life pretty easy. So let's go ahead and do this. All right, so I'm going to choose this thing right here. All right. All right, and we are going to, actually, let's go ahead and do this. The value I'm looking for is 10, sorry, and the table array is this. So that's what we're looking up. The column index number. So which one of these columns am I going to find? Let's go for 2. All right, and we could do another one where it offsets to another one, but that's too much to even deal with right now. All right, so we're going to find the 10th one in this case. So the 10th one happens to be 1,000. So we find 10 and we get 1,000 out of that. All right, we can also go back here and change that to 3. So I'll look at the third one, the third column on this. All right, that's kind of useful, right? We could do that over here. Let's do another VLOOKUP. We can go ahead and do these here if we wanted to. Let's actually, better yet, let's go ahead and move on because we got plenty to show you here. So this is VLOOKUP. Let's look at index. Okay, so equals index. All right, so this one actually has multiple pieces of information that we're going to try to find. Let's find let's find this. So row number, let's go for row number 2. All right, and column number 2. See, look. All right, so this is what we have here. So index is going to basically offset into here with this section go in 2, go over 2. Now if we change this to a 3, it would look at that. It's pretty cool, huh? We could also do something called nesting. Okay, so nesting is this awesome thing where we take one function and put it in another function. Kind of like baking pancakes. All right, so we're going to do ran between. One comma 30. All right, so now it is finding a random column or random row here and giving us back the last value. In this case, it chose 121, 8, this one right here. So number 29. So if we keep doing that, we can see what it does here. So if you need to randomly choose a set of numbers from a set of numbers, this would work fine as well. So that is what is called nesting. All right, so let's also try the last one here. All right, so that's match. So this allows us to get this match something. Imagine that. All right, so we're going to look up, let's say 20. And we're going to pass it the array here. And we're going to do it a match type of 0 because we want it to be exact. All right, so we're going to press enter there. So it found it. So it found 20. All right, so that's, that's kind of useful. Now, if we go over here, we're going to try match version 2. There. All right, so the value is, let's see, 4,200. No, let's go for 1,900. 1901. All right, when we do the lookup array, is this one. All right, but we want the exact type. We're going to get an error. We're going to get the n/a because I can't find it. It's going, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. So let's go ahead and change this. Let's do +1. And it found it. So, like I said earlier, if you're confused at what it is, you can click on the little blue underline and we can actually go look it up. So this last one is the match type. So we have these here. If we find the smallest one is greater than or equal, or match if it's largest value that is less than or equal to the lookup value. So we can use that as well. Or 0 for exact match. And if you leave it out, it assumes 1. All right, so we have those. I didn't mean to do that. So Command Z undoes that, and we get out of there. All right, so let's move on here. Okay, so let's say you want to find basically a values position in a set of data that was sorted. So we have this rank function. So if we have a list of things, you can find out the position. We also have one called percent rank, so that allows us to do the same thing, but we get a percentage rank. And the last one here, over the percentile, allows us to basically find that percentile of the entire group. So, and of course, we have one called large. Basically, it allows us to find the X largest value. So that means if we went the first largest value, that would be the first one. The second largest, third largest. So if we have this array of numbers, when we find the largest one, we can actually find that value. The first, second, and third place. Great for doing that. All right, let's continue on. Let's talk about what are called data tables. This is kind of one of those what-if things. This actually allows us to run a bunch of numbers. Okay, so if you're sitting here working through stuff and you're like, I want to see what my payments would be if I had these different interest rates and these different payout times. So how many payments you're going to make. And you could use this to actually set up a table to see what it looks like. So I'm going to quickly run through this here. Let's go ahead and drop open a new sheet here because this one can get kind of, I should put it, kind of messy. All right, so the first thing we need to do is we need to create two values here. We're just going to multiply these two numbers. 1 and 2. All right, and we're going to take this and do this equals this one plus this one. All right, so we're going to do those two. All right, and we're going to run here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10. And do that same thing down here. 1, 2, 3. All right, so I'm a lazy bum, and we're going to do this. I'm going to select all of these. And I'm going to hit what if, data table. All right, so it wants to know these values here. So this one will be the row input, and this one will be the column input. And look, it filled it out. So I took this formula and ran these numbers on it. So you notice we did all that. We can modify this. We can multiply. So now you have multiplication tables. Pretty cool. There's all kinds of things we can do that. We could even do this. Now, this will probably pop up a few errors if we do it wrong. Yeah, because our values got flipped there. So it's like, hey, I don't like that. But whatever. Pretty cool, huh? All right, so let's kind of move on there. Actually, let me go ahead and flip this to something a little bit more rational here. All right, and I'm going to do something here real quick to show you. Let's say you want to do something like make a nice chart. We have color scales here. We can do this. All right, you can color it according to scale, and it'll figure that out by what you selected. It's pretty handy. It does things, and it scales well. All right, so let's continue on, since we're going pretty far. All right, so here we have what's called a histogram. So basically, how often something happens. So let's go ahead and give that a try. All right, so let's look at this. So we're going to do equals rand between 1, 1000. All right, and we're going to do this, well, I don't know, a few times. All right, and if we, if we go back here, so this is our frequency table. We're gonna figure this out here. All right, so this is all output here. So let's go ahead and pull something here. We are missing something, so we're going to actually have to go in and install something. Preferences, and let's see. I believe it's under. All right, so the histogram here is basically a way that allows us to take a big bunch of values and kind of divide them off into buckets. So this kind of gives you, allows you to like break things up by income or age groups or things like that. So this allows you to kind of separate it off and see kind of this distribution of values. In Windows, you're going to have to install the Analysis Toolpak add-in. You'll go through that in You'll see a little document. I'll show you how to do it in kind of an external document because it's taken a little bit. But unfortunately, in the 2011 version of the Mac Office, it doesn't exist, sadly. All right, so let's move on. Next thing I'm going to do is the Monte Carlo simulation. So with the Monte Carlo simulation, we actually have the ability to test stuff. So math is good, we can work it out, but we really want to see how it works in the real world, don't we? And because we know random isn't perfect, we want to test this. So this whole simulation is kind of works due to the law of large numbers. So doing something a whole bunch of times allows you to find out how often stuff happens. So let's go ahead and zip over here real quick to Excel. All right, so here I've already set it up. We have a few things going on here. Actually, you know what? We're going to run another version of this. We'll do this again. So if rand between 0, comma 1. All right, so that's going to be a coin flip right there, and we're going to do 2 of them. And we're going to do, well, let's go ahead and drag these down. I'm going to show you a little trick. We're going to make this shorter, and we're going to select the whole thing here, and we're going to drag it down. Now, you'll notice as we pull further, it gets faster. Very, very useful, because scrolling takes forever. It really does. It'll take you at least 10 minutes to do this. Well, it feels like 10 minutes. It's probably only a few minutes, but see, we went past it pretty far, so to 1,000. All right, so we now have 1,000 flips of 2 coins. Flipping 2 coins 1,000 times. All right, so let's go ahead and find out if, let's find out if these 2 coins are both heads. So we're going to nest some statements here. So we're going to nest an and inside of this if. So if that equals 1 and, now let's do 0 in this case. 0, yeah, I don't need 1, that's okay. 1 and B1 is equal to 1. And if both of those are true, then we get a win. All right. Otherwise, it's a loss. All right, so that one's a win. And here's a dirty trick. So if you need to copy this down all the way, instead of dragging it, you can just go up here and double click. Hey, look at that. It went ahead and copied them all down. All right, so now let's do something here. Let's use COUNTIF. Oops. Let's use COUNTIF here to count the number of wins. So we're going to do C1 through C10000. C10,000. Oh, let's not in that yet. We need to tell it when to count it. And that happens to be win, right? Close that out. C. Out of 10,000 times, the win has come up 2,482. That's 24.82. Not bad. 25.41. 24.61, 24, look, it's staying around 25 to 24%. So our calculations, if we were to do it manually, happen to work out. So if you take a coin flip, which is a 50-50 chance, right? And you do it twice, so you take that 50% chance, that 1 of 2, and you multiply it by 1 of 2, what do you get? You get 1/4 or 25%. And we see it working out here. So this is the Monte Carlo simulation. The Monte Carlo simulation. The law of large numbers tells us, that allows us to simulate stuff. Now, let's talk about another Monty. In this case, Monty Hall. So there was a game show called Let's Make a Deal, and the host's name was Monty Hall, and he had this problem. It wasn't really a problem. At the end of the show, one of the contestants would have the chance at winning a car. So there would be 3 doors on stage. Each behind would have either one of 2 goats or a car. So 2 doors contain goats and 1 door contained a car. So the way it would work is he'd ask the contestant which door do they want to open. And they would have a 1 in 3 chance of finding the correct answer, right? So they'd choose that door, and Monty would come up and ask them, would open one of the doors. So one of the other 2 doors, one of the ones that was a goat. So he would always open a door with a goat. So with that, the contestant had a choice of whether they stayed with the one they chose or they opened the other door. And you're thinking, now why would they choose? Why would they do that? Because, you know, it's still the same values, right? That's wrong, actually. Monty would always open the one with the goat. So he would take one out of the equation. So on the second try, instead of having a 1 in 3 chance of guessing from the first one, you'd have a 1 in 2. So you would be better off opening the door on the second try, and you'd be better off switching. So if you chose door number 1, Monty opened door number 2. Door number 3 actually had a higher chance of having the goat, and you'd be better off switching the 2. So that's the Monty Hall problem. It's kind of one of those interesting things on probability, and you can even simulate it, and it works out great. You can even do it in Excel if you want. Now, if you want to know more, go ahead and look it up on YouTube. There's many, many great descriptions. But I think you're probably tired of hearing me now. So have a good time. Enjoy simulating things in Excel. Bye-bye.